Coming up on the program today. Russian missiles hit an electrical substation in the Ukrainian city of Lviv, knocking power in many districts and leaving many without water. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson determined to get people through the cost of living crisis ahead of Thursday's local elections. Plus, North Korea fires ballistic missiles from Sunan, South Korea. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Millicent Walker in Lagos. As the flames settle, one can see the destruction from Russian missiles after hitting electrical substations in the Ukrainian city of Lviv. People in the city are currently left without power and water. Here's more in this report.
The power station in Ukraine's western city of Lviv was damaged by an airstrike on Tuesday. Mayor of the city, Andriy Dovi, says the airstrikes on the power station cut off electricity in some districts and that water networks in his city, near the Polish border, across which flow Western arms supplies for Ukraine's military, were also damaged during the strikes. Russia has turned its heaviest firepower on Ukraine's east and south since failing to take Kyiv, the capital, in March. But it has also struck much further west in a drive to limit Ukraine's access to the Black Sea, vital for its grains and metal exports, and also to disrupt supplies of Western military aid to President Volodymyr Zelensky's force. Firefighters battled Tuesday night to put out the blaze. The explosions happened nearly 10 weeks into a war that has killed thousands, devastated cities, and driven 5 million Ukrainians to flee abroad. The city has been spared most of the fighting since the invasion of Ukraine. Lviv is hundreds of miles from Russia's advance, and it has been one of the main destinations for Ukrainians forced to flee battle zones. Ukraine's defense ministry says Russia is attempting to increase tempo of its offensive in the east of the country. The defense ministry spokesman gave few details but said Moscow had conducted nearly 50 airstrikes on Tuesday, May the 3rd alone. He also said Russian artillery fire and airstrikes were continuing periodically on the Azovstal steelworks in Mariupol, where the last Ukrainian defenders of the southern port city hold up. On Wednesday, Russia's defense ministry said it had disabled 6 railway stations in Ukraine used to supply Ukrainian forces with Western-made weapons in the country's east. The ministry said it had disabled the railway stations by bombing their power supplies using high-precision air and sea-based weapons. It did not say which Western-made weapons were supplied to Ukrainian forces via those stations. The ministry also said it had hit 40 Ukrainian military targets, including 4 depots storing ammunition and artillery weapons. It also published video footage of the cruise missiles being launched from the Black Sea and said they had hit unspecified ground targets in Ukraine. Meanwhile, a large fire engulfed an oil storage in the town of Makivka in the Donetsk region Wednesday morning. Russia-backed authorities in the area said the site had been the target of a missile strike by the Ukrainian military, but provided no evidence to support the claim. Russia, on the other hand, has reiterated a warning that it will seek to destroy convoys of arms shipments to Ukraine from Western countries, which in recent weeks have stepped up these supplies. The United States and its NATO allies are continuing to pump weapons into Ukraine, so says Russia's defense minister, and that any transport of the North Atlantic Alliance arriving on the territory of the country with weapons or materials destined to the Ukrainian army as a legitimate target will be destroyed.
One of Russia's television stations that could come under the latest EU sanctions, Gazprom Media's NTV, has reported today's European Commission President's proposal to phase out Russian oil. The media house suggested the approval of the proposal was by no means certain, and even if it is approved by the bloc, the ban on Russian oil will first and foremost harm consumers in Europe. Earlier today, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen proposed a phased oil embargo on Russia over its war in Ukraine. Ukraine, as well as sanctioning Russia's top bank and banning broadcasters from European airwaves in a bid to deepen Moscow's isolation. The plan, if agreed by EU governments, would mark a watershed for the world's largest trading bloc, which is dependent on Russian energy and must find alternative supplies. But Russia's invasion of Ukraine by land, sea and air February 24, the renewed offensive in eastern Ukraine and the horrific images of slaughter in Ukrainian towns have overcome reluctance to deliver the toughest sanctions so far.
Today, we are presenting our sixth package of sanctions. First, we are listing high-ranking military officers and individuals who committed war crimes in Bucha, and those who are sends another important signal to all perpetrators of the Kremlin. We know who you are. We will hold you accountable. You're not getting away with this. Second, we finally de-SWIFT Sberbank. Sberbank is the largest Russian bank. It holds round about 37% of the whole banking sector. And we will also de-SWIFT two other major banks in Russia. By that, we hit banks that are systemically critical to the Russian financial system and Putin's ability to wage destruction. We're banning 3 big Russian state-owned broadcasters from our airwaves. They will not be allowed to distribute their content anymore in the European Union in whatever shape or form, be it on cable, via satellite, on the internet, or via smartphone apps. We have identified these TV channels as mouthpieces that amplify Putin's lies and propaganda aggressively. And we should not give them a stage anymore to spread these lies. We are addressing our dependency on Russian oil. And let's be clear, it will not be easy, because some member states are strongly dependent on Russian oil, but we simply have to do it. So today we will propose to ban all Russian oil from Europe. This will be
In the meantime, we understand a new attempt to evacuate residents from the southern port city of Mariupol and surrounding areas is currently taking place. The city has seen the heaviest fighting of the war so far, and a group of Ukrainian soldiers and hundreds of civilians are still trapped in the Azovstal steelworks plant. Regional Governor Pavlo Kyrylenko says a convoy of buses carrying civilians had set off for the city in Zaporizhzhia this morning and is not expected to include many people trapped in the steelworks. According to the city mayor, more than 30 children are awaiting evacuation from the plant, and heavy fighting is taking place there, though contact with Ukrainian fighters inside has been lost. The Kremlin denies that Russia is storming the steelworks after Ukraine accused Moscow of launching a powerful assault. Well, staying with restrictions on Russia, the UK has announced Russia has been banned from using British management, consulting, accounting and PR. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says the ban will cut off service exports critical to the Russian economy, adding that it will help ensure the Russian president fails in Ukraine. Other sanctions among the 63 introduced today target Russian media organizations and those working for them. VOA's Anna Chernikova joins us now from Kyiv. Hello, Anna. Good to see you. I want to begin with the latest sanctions we've seen from the EU, and that especially, from the UK and especially from the EU, the ban, the phased oil embargo on Russia, sanctioning its top bank, broadcast. How much is this news to Ukrainians with regards to this latest measures? How are they receiving the news?
Hello. Finally, Ukrainians, we were waiting for this moment from the very beginning, because starting from the first day of war, Ukrainian President Zelensky and Ukrainian government asked the European Union to ban Russian oil. It was one of the main suggestions and one of the main ideas from the Ukrainian side, because Ukrainians clearly understand that this would actually help a lot, and this would play a very major role in Russian economy and in this war as a result. So this is a very great news for Ukrainians. We don't have yet official reaction, but it's coming in the evening in Mr. President's evening speech, as he does usually. So we're waiting, but I'm pretty sure it's a very positive result for Ukraine. And of course, Sberbank ban from SWIFT is also very crucial, which is definitely, I think that this 6 package is one of the strongest so far. Of course, we should consider it as a part of the packages, like a pack of packages, but this one is really, really positive for Ukraine.
And Anna, let's go over to the evacuation taking place in Mariupol. How many more days are left? Tell us about the situation there.
Very complicated, extremely complicated situation. And I should say that starting with evacuation a couple of days ago, so the first evacuation happened on the 1st of May. Today is day number 3. And unfortunately, I should say that we don't know yet, and there is no predictions of how long and how more days this would take place. According to what we know for the moment, that out of all the buses that were able to evacuate people, only 4 buses reached Ukrainian territory so far. I'm sorry, only 3 buses, which makes it 156 people. We don't know yet what's happening with other 11 buses. So what's the destiny of these people? According to officials from Mariupol, they are probably stuck at the filtration centers, so-called filtration centers created by Russians and located in 4 spots of Mariupol. We all hope that these people would make it through and will come to Ukrainian controlled territory. In terms of today's evacuation, again, no information yet on when the bus would reach Ukrainian controlled side. So we're just hoping and waiting for people to come back. There are mostly women and children and old people on the buses. Also, we know about the evacuation with the first wave of evacuation, about the evacuation of 40 heavily injured soldiers. But this is what we know so far. In terms of situation at Azovstal, it's very dangerous at the moment. There are reports that apparently it was a breakthrough. So it was a second assault, heavy assault today on the Mariupol Azovstal plant. The first one happened yesterday. During the night, very heavy bombs were used to attack the plant. Also, I cannot kind of confirm 100%, but reportedly there were seen the thermatic warheads used to attack the plant. So today there were no connection with the Ukrainian soldiers who remain there, and we know that probably heavy battles are now happening on the territory of the plant. So this is what we know so far.
And one really begins to wonder how many more are left, and if indeed they will be able to leave. We understand that there were a number of protests with women holding up signs calling Ukrainian authorities to evacuate soldiers, their relatives and loved ones who are still trapped in Azovstal. And we also know that the evacuation is taking place with, Russian authorities, Ukraine, and also the International Red Cross.
Yes, so the evacuation is happening with UN and Red Cross representatives. It was confirmed by both sides, but unfortunately, what we see is that it doesn't go that smoothly as it could, because again, I would just repeat that 11 buses just disappeared and we don't know where they are at the moment. We know that from the very beginning, there were about 2,000 people at the plant. And we know that, and it was supposed to be 90 buses for evacuation. Only 14 buses were allowed. In terms of today's evacuation, we don't know yet how many buses were allowed. So I should say that what we know from the officials, that at least 200 people remain there, the civilians. In terms of the protest that you mentioned, I would not call it a protest. It was just kind of calling for help by the wives of the soldiers and by the relatives of the soldiers, because we know that some families, the wives with children and relatives of the soldiers, have been also evacuated from the plant, while their husbands remained there protecting the plant and fighting. Ukrainian authorities were asking for exchange and were asking for deblockade. So there are negotiations on that, but Russian side so far didn't even considered as what we know again officially to accept that. So for the moment, we don't have any hopes that Ukrainian soldiers could be just extracted, as it's called, extracted from the plant. We'll be waiting for additional news on that. I know that Ukrainian president is taking this as one of the priorities and put it on the international level of negotiations. But unfortunately, for the moment, Russian side didn't agree on that.
Let's move over to Donbas. Tell us a bit about the military status on the side of Ukraine and, of course, Russia. And we know that Russia is preparing for their May 9th Victory Day, isn't it?
Donbas remains one of the main, let's say, stage of this war, so of the battles at the moment. And we all understand that Russian soldiers, Russian side and government, they're trying to make a breakthrough as much as possible by May 9th, because they need certain certain so-called victory by the May 9th, as different kind of events are going to happen in Moscow. And as we know, also in Mariupol, Russians are preparing a military parade in Mariupol on May 9 as well. So what Ukrainian officials and intelligence is saying that escalation is going to happen soon again. So Russian forces are regrouping at the moment, and they would try to break through to reach the administrative borders of Donetsk and Luhansk region. However, Ukrainian soldiers had a very successful couple of days in the area, especially at Izum direction, because Izum, it is Kharkiv region city, but it's just on the border with Donetsk region. And this is the way actually to the administrative border. So one of the main battlefield is happening there right now. And Ukrainian soldiers destroyed hundreds of Russian soldiers just a couple of days before it was confirmed. And Ukrainian soldiers destroyed 2 commander centers. Reportedly, one general is a very important general is heavily damaged, injured, and another one could be dead. But again, there is no confirmation yet, but it was very successful operation by Ukrainian soldiers, which stuck Russian forces a lot. So for the moment, we see the regrouping, and apparently we should expect escalation and provocations from Russian side, because again, I would repeat that they're trying to reach at least certain victory, so-called victory, by May 9th.
Anna, thank you so much. We continue to follow the developments. I'm sure the whole world is hoping that this invasion ends as quickly as possible. Thanks a lot, Anna.
Thank you.
Coming up after the break. Record-breaking rain in the month of May triggers floods causing chaos in Valencia, Spain. Please stay with us. Welcome back to The World Today. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said he is determined to get people through the cost of living crisis, just as he says we got people through COVID. Johnson made the statement during a visit to Southampton Airport in southern England, a day before local elections are scheduled to take place across the country. Voters will go to the polls Thursday to elect thousands of regional officials in what is seen as a rough gauge of how well Johnson is performing against a backdrop of scandal, war in Ukraine, and a cost of living crisis. Johnson stressed the importance of dealing with the supply side issues that are causing the inflation spike in prices. The sharp rise in global energy prices that has pushed up consumers' gas and electricity bills is now also feeding through the cost of goods in shops, putting more pressure on household budgets. Having raised taxes to help pay off money spent during the COVID-19 pandemic, and with only a limited package of relief to offset price rises, the UK government has been forced to resist calls during the election campaign to commit to more spending. Johnson also said he feels confident he will succeed at the next election together with his ruling Conservative Party.
I totally understand why people are feeling the pressures caused particularly by the cost of energy that's feeding through into food and just about everything else, and you can see it everywhere. So the most important thing, and we do think it'll abate, we do think it'll come down, but I can't give you the answer to that. But we think in the medium term it will certainly come down. But what we need to do, get people through this, just as we got people through COVID, being as compassionate, as ingenious as we can be, think of all the ways we can help. Without, we've got to remember that we only have limited resources of taxpayers' money, so we have to be sensible about how we do it. But then deal with the supply side issues that are causing the inflation spike. So there are issues particularly to do with the cost of energy that we can fix by making sure that we boost our UK energy supply. And how crazy it is that as one of the greatest countries in the world, fifth biggest economy in the world, we're mainlining energy from France. We need to have more homegrown supply. We need to be investing more in our own energy. That's why we had the British Energy Security Strategy, more nuclear, more offshore wind that I announced the other day, plus more hydrocarbons as well as a transition.
Meanwhile, opposition Labour Party leader Keir Starmer campaigned today ahead of local elections that will provide a snapshot of national sentiment in the United Kingdom. Starmer met with pensioners in Wakefield, where some serenaded him with a Lena Zavaroni song. Starmer also addressed allegations of a possible violation of lockdown rules. It was reported the accusation stemmed from Starmer drinking a beer at an MP's office. A sharp rise in global energy prices has pushed up the gas and electricity bills. He indeed hopes that his party can solve the problems.
Well, here in Yorkshire we're fighting for every vote, and I know we've got to earn every vote. I'm really pleased that we've got a brilliant set of candidates, we've got a positive message, and we have been laser-like in our focus on the cost of living crisis, because wherever you go, people come up, particularly to me, and say, look, I can't pay my bills here. And I've been able to say, we would have a windfall tax on the oil and gas companies in the North Sea, and we'd use that to help with energy bills. So, very positive case, but we've got to earn every vote, taking nothing for granted. We want to hold what we've got and take gains where we can. No, I've not had contact from Durham Police, and I think people are just about fed up with the mudslinging that's going on. We know there's elections coming, we know what the Conservatives are up to. What we need to do, I think, is to focus on the issue in hand, which is the cost of living, because as we go across the region, we go across the country, talking to people on their doorsteps, everybody is talking about the fact they can't pay their bills.
Well, over in the United States, midterm elections are already starting to speak to the challenges Americans are facing with the economy, as several primary election results are indicating that Americans want to see more money in their pockets. Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird has more. We'll bring you that report shortly, but let's go over to Spain, where the region of Valencia experienced a record-breaking downpour for the month of May on Tuesday, which triggered floods and caused chaos to the transport system. Drone footage showed swaths of agricultural land submerged underwater as the Spanish region of Valencia experienced a record-breaking downpour, which damaged homes and caused chaos in the transport system. By 1800 GMT, Valencia, which is on Spain's eastern Mediterranean coast, registered 201.1 litres of rain per square metre over a span of 24 hours. The largest rainfall registered for the month of May since records began to be kept in 1871. Local media reported tunnels had been closed and the metro system was also shut. Torrential rain caused delays in highways, video footage showing cars submerged underwater. Valencia's fire department reported it had carried out several rescue operations where people were trapped in their cars in heavily flooded areas, with the rain showing no sign of abating. Spain's weather agency, AMET, designated a yellow alert for the region today. And let's now bring you the report on the U.S. midterm elections, which appear to be peaking up as Americans say they want more money in their pockets. Take a look.
Consumer spending in the U.S. is being impacted as a result of inflation, as Americans are experiencing increased prices at gas pumps, convenience, and grocery stores.
Say anything with the healthcare component. We've seen a company like CVS be very well supported throughout the pandemic, and actually that has been well supported throughout. Something like Walmart, that would be seen. Well, what's the difference really between a Walmart and a Target? It's not always apparent. What's the difference between a Walmart and an Amazon? But it seems that investors are discriminating between these two because they're seeing that Walmart might perhaps be the essential purchases that consumers need to make. We're also seeing areas such as Chipotle. If we look at the kind of the segment of dining that is not fine dining.
While the economic projections anticipated that the tech industry would grow post-COVID, recent economic trends say otherwise.
So that's why we're seeing Tesla's had its own woes. There's been an element of drama behind many of the big tech stocks today. But something that was very particular to the pandemic and the circumstances there, such as Peloton, we've already seen that dramatically down from its peaks. And so just something like Netflix streaming, clearly that was very much a function of our stay-at-home environment. And we're now going to be trading, the summer's coming, we're going to be spending less time indoors on screens and perhaps looking at other ways of spending our time.
Consumers are feeling the financial pinch, while U.S. President Joe Biden states that a recession isn't likely.
I'm not concerned about a recession. And I mean, you're always concerned about a recession, but the GDP, fell to 1.4%. But here's the deal. We're also had last quarter consumer spending and business investment and residential investment increased at significant rates, both for leisure as well as hard products, number one. Number two, unemployment is the lowest rate since 1970.
The White House's optimistic view of the economy dovetails oil companies like Shell, stating that they are not responsible for the escalation in consumer gas prices.
Shell does not set or control the price that consumers pay. Indeed, it would be illegal for Shell to do so because nearly all Shell-branded retail stations in the U.S. are owned by independent operators who set their own prices in the marketplace.
The economic downturn will be a concern for both Republicans and Democrats in the upcoming midterm elections. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channel Television News.
And Maria Bird joins us right now. Hi, Maria. Tell us, how much higher are gas prices soaring in the U.S., and is there really a threat of recession?
The gas prices continue to escalate. They're really trying to get a handle on some of that, with using some of the reserve as with the oil and gas of that nature. But, we're not really seeing where we're getting any sort of a relief in that area. It's only expected to increase. We also know the summer months, typically gas prices already increase. And so with some of the issues we are experiencing economically, this is definitely going to have a major impact, I think, for the next couple of months. And there's no signs and no speculations from economists that we will definitely see a reduction in those gas prices. Many states have done things trying to have a tax-free gas, and so meaning putting some sort of a bar on taxes on gas, but those are short-lived. States can't live off of not taxing gas for a long period of time. So I think we're definitely looking for this throughout the summer months in the U.S.
And it is also one of the economic trends, on President Biden and the Democrats. How much impact will this have ahead of November's midterm elections?
This is going to have a major impact. We know that Americans are starting to try to relive, right? They're trying to come back to what they saw prior to COVID. And unfortunately, many Americans and the American economy has not really adjusted. Oftentimes people look at the American economy being able just to start back up, but it really was almost put to sleep during COVID. And so having to re-wake an economy without having any adjustments made has proved to be very difficult. And I think many Americans are in a position now, as you stated, the midterm elections are coming forth. We've seen over the last 5 to 6 years that Americans have been very vocal as it relates to their voting. And Americans have been very clear about what they're interested in. And so when you see individuals like J.D. Vance in Ohio, who won the Republican nomination, and you see that he was clearly supported by former President Trump, that tells you that Americans are not afraid to be very clear about what they're looking for in the upcoming midterms.
What are the polls saying? We understand that there are a few that say that President Biden's standing with Americans has improved slightly over the past 2 months. One can't help but think about the Ukraine invasion by Russia. And according to those polls, it says that he remains in negative territory in most assessments of his performance in office. What's the situation over there?
Well, as we've talked about before, President Biden has stood on the areas of being an expert in foreign relations. And I think that many were hopeful, whether or not you stood on the Democratic or the Republican side of the fence, were hopeful that he would be able to bring the U.S. back to a leader globally. And the Ukraine-Russia war has obviously been a moment that he has served as a leader, and he has put America and the U.S. as a leader in that war. And so I think that at this time where you're seeing Americans are definitely happy with, and I think they believe that he's made the right decisions in that area. But when you look at the economy and some of the other areas that Americans have been pushing for, and you look at the post-COVID era that we're entering, you look at some of the healthcare challenges that still exist in America, I think that's where Americans will begin to go to the polls and vote. And as you said, even though the polls are a little bit better than they were a few months ago, we're still not where I think the Democrats are hopeful that the president would be as we're beginning to enter into a midterm season, and really being able to see if Democrats are going to be able to hold on to some of those seats come November.
But are there signs that the Republicans hold advantages over the Democrats, and this is in terms of the economic indicators?
Many people are going to tout that the Republicans, and obviously those that are supporters of former President Trump, are going to state that economically the U.S. was stronger during that period of time. They're going to state that Americans have more money in their pockets. We know that typically those who supported President Trump are those who are not as educated, those who do not have college degrees. And so he was able to really galvanize middle America. He was able to push forward his agenda in that area. And so there are many Republicans that are falling in line with that and and pushing forward to say, listen, you have more money in your pocket. You did not have inflation challenges as we are today, which obviously is going to resonate and hit the hearts of many of those in middle America, and especially those who are strong and long-term supporters of the Republican Party.
Yes, and, it's as if President Biden's approval ticks up, yet it remains underwater from what it is you're saying. But then we're also seeing that it's a lot in terms of good-paying jobs. According to another poll, it says half of Americans, 50%, say good-paying jobs are easy to find in their communities. Findings that reflect the unemployment rate standing near half a century low. Strategists and pollsters are increasingly talking about limiting the party's expected losses in November rather than how to gain new seats. Maria, What are your projections?
Well, what we see, as you stated, there are, the jobs are a little bit more plentiful than they have been. And the hope is that trend continues. We are seeing a reduction, as the president mentioned, in the unemployment rates that continues to be pretty low. The challenge is that Americans were used to being able to be at home, and obviously the costs were far less during the COVID era. So we're not only dealing with an increase in cost because people are beginning to live their lives again, but we are dealing with inflation. And so despite the fact that people are employed, the question is, are their salaries representative of what it takes to be able to sustain their lifestyles for their family, and a lifestyle that they could have become accustomed to during the COVID era, especially due to the fact that the cost of living was far less, the expenses were far less, people were home more, so that drives your costs down.
Maria, always a pleasure. Thank you for the latest from the US. And Maryland Governor Larry Hogan says the Republican Party is desperately in need of a course correction and warns against renominating Donald Trump for the presidency come 2024. It says the party won't win back the White House by nominating Donald Trump or a cheap impersonation of him. Hogan also urges Republicans to stand against the extremes and try to appeal to a broader swath of American voters. He is seen as a possible Republican presidential candidate in 2024.
The truth is, the last election was not rigged. It wasn't stolen. We simply didn't offer the majority of voters.
And North Korea has fired a ballistic missile towards the sea off its east coast a week after Pyongyang promised to develop nuclear forces at the fastest possible speed. The launch, announced by South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, marks the North's 14th known weapons test this year. It comes days before South Korea's newly elected president, Yoon Suk-yeol, takes office May 10. It is also the latest test on April 16 and involved a new tactical guided weapon aimed at boosting the country's nuclear capabilities. South Korea's JCS says it detected the launch around noon today and the Sunan area of Pyongyang, where an international airport is located and from which North Korea said it fired its largest intercontinental ballistic missile, the Hwasong-17, on March 24. Mexican police have found 280 migrants trapped behind a fake wall inside a truck abandoned in a highway near the southern town of Cordoba. According to a report from the Veracruz police, the migrants were from Nicaragua, El Salvador, Cuba, Ecuador, Guatemala, and Honduras. 18 of them were minors. Locals realized the migrants were trapped after they heard screams coming from a truck that broke down. Red Cross worker George Garcia told reporters 3 migrants were taken to hospital for dehydration. Police placed the migrants under custody of the National Migration Institute, INM, who will determine their legal status in the country.
Nosotros lo que estamos haciendo en México es aplicar la ley que tenemos en nuestro país.
Still ahead on the program. Batman, Princess Elsa, and others bring cheer to children in Argentinian prison. Please stay with us. Welcome back. And here on the continent, one of Kenya's most popular rappers is requiring voter registration cards to get into his concert in a bid to excite voters about this August election, but it's not working. Kenya has been one of the region's most vibrant democracies, but voters are downcast by years of broken campaign pledges and corruption scandals.
Octopizzo, one of Kenya's hottest artists, rapped about the celebrity high life at a concert in the western Kenyan city of Eldoret. The event was part of his Umechukwa campaign aimed at convincing young people to vote in August elections that would choose a successor to outgoing President Uhuru Kenyatta and thousands of local and national representatives. Valentine Ndalo, a 26-year-old performing artist who also performed, isn't interested in the poll.
I voted in the last elections since I had a voter's card, and the people who were elected have disappointed us. They did not help in any way. So this time, I have not registered to vote, as I don't intend to vote, because it does not benefit me.
Registration drives have so far netted only 2.5 million new voters, fewer than half of the 6 million targeted, in one of the worst performances since the advent of multi-party democracy in 1992. The two main presidential candidates, Deputy President William Ruto and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, are veteran politicians from a system that enriches the wealthy, according to critics and many young people. Apathy may reduce the risk of election-related violence, which has blighted Kenya in the past. In 2007, the country saw clashes that left 1,300 people dead after disputed polls. But others fear there could be trouble and that the disenfranchised may revolt. Rapper Octopizzo, legal name Henry Ohanga, grew up in a patchwork of rusted corrugated iron shacks of the giant Kibera slum in the capital, Nairobi. He sympathizes with voter frustration, but still pleads to people to vote.
For us, it's giving them the understanding that this is the power, the most power you'll ever have as a young person or as a registered voter, that you have a power to fire and hire, you know, and that power has not been told to us. We just think, yeah, you go vote, you go home. They don't know, like, it's the biggest power you only have once every 5 years to choose to move this direction, move this country in a different direction.
Domestic worker Salmu Juma registered to vote outside the concert.
I am glad that I made the decision to come and get registered. Everyone has a right to vote in whoever they want, hoping things will improve and become better. Right now, we have children going to school, yet the economy is a challenge. There are no jobs. If you get a job, you must value it and work diligently. I'm optimistic that the one we will vote in will help improve things, especially for low-income earners.
But few of the 500-plus concert goers share their enthusiasm. Only 101 people registered.
Many of them, you know, seem not to be very much keen on participating in the elections. Discussions we have with them, they tell us, you know, they don't see change in their lives, you know, so there is no point of voting. You vote in the same people, you know. So there is that general voter apathy, which we have seen particularly in the youthful age, who are supposed to be coming into the voting bracket.
Voters say some apathy is down to uneven economic growth. The gap between Kenya's rich and poorest is one of the highest in Africa, government statistics show.
We don't have time to go there and register as voters yet. That time we can use to hustle and get something. Instead of going there, we vote for them. They don't help us. They don't build anything. No infrastructures.
East Africa's economic powerhouse has been one of the region's most vibrant democracies, but voters are disillusioned after years of broken promises, corruption scandals, and allegations of vote rigging.
Away from Kenya, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Filipino Grandi, urges stronger support for internally displaced persons, refugees and host communities in Cameroon's far north region. The intercommunal conflict began last year after herders clashed with farmers and fishermen over dwindling water resources. The UNHCR and partners say they are doing what they can to provide emergency assistance and create more durable solutions to mitigate further conflict and bring peace to the local communities. At least 100,000 people have been displaced internally or fled to neighboring countries.
Some of the children go to the schools of the local community, and they use the health centers of the local community, which are insufficient. So we need to strengthen the local community. So when these people go away, this will remain as an investment. as a development investment. We have to support that reconciliation as well, because without reconciliation and without reconstruction, people will not go back and it will become a protracted humanitarian problem. We have to avoid that. When we help displaced, can we do it in a manner that is friendly to the environment? And here I have seen very good examples of this. I have seen solar energy being used. I have planted myself trees in a small reforestation project. I think it's important that we, the aid workers and the government, think of even humanitarian assistance in green terms, in environmental friendly terms. And it's a small project, but a great examples to the rest of the world.
And according to a new UN report, nearly 193 million people in the world are in acute food insecurity. This represents an increase of nearly 40 million people from the previous year, confirming an alarming trend. This has been on the rise over the last 6 years. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, major food crisis countries remain those suffering from protracted conflict like Afghanistan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, Nigeria, South Sudan, Syria, and Yemen.
The main number of the global report is 193 million people facing high level of acute food insecurity. This is a record number, is 40 million higher than last year, and if you look this on a long-term trend, is 2 times the number that we had 6 years ago. So what is really worrying is the tendency and the trends that we are facing in terms of acute food insecurity. What is really at the root causes of this, and this is what is very important for FAO mandate, is that all these derive from a situation of rural marginalization, rural poverty, which is really the main cause of this crisis. You start from rural poverty, rural marginalization, and then you have all these other factors feeding each other and bring to the number that we just mentioned. There is a likelihood that the number will increase again compared to 2021. And we have not yet factored in the Ukraine crisis, which is what we call the elephant in the room. We don't know yet what will be the effect of the Ukraine crisis on the overall global food insecurity. So this is something very important. So what is very important for us is to make sure, and I'm talking on FAO, to make sure that we keep on monitoring the countries most at risk of acute hunger and famine. Because at the moment, because of the attention that is paid to Ukraine, there is a risk that we simply forget about other crises.
Away from Africa, it's been another day of memorial for Israelis who stood still for 2 minutes to commemorate its fallen soldiers and Israeli civilians killed in hostile attacks. In Jerusalem, Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett addressed a state memorial ceremony in which he vowed to target not only those who hurt Israel directly, but also those who send them. Mr. Bennett also added the era of immunity for the creators and dispatchers of terrorism is over. Not only the terrorists, he said, the messenger at the end of the line will pay the price, but also those who send him, even if he is 1,000 kilometers east of here. It is not, however, only gloom all day. Later today, the country's mood shifts with the start of Independence Day celebrations. What you're hearing is the Israeli Memorial Day sirens. And to Argentina, where Argentine volunteers are trying to bring a little superhero cheer to children living with their mothers in prison. dressing up as Batman, Iron Man and Princess Elsa as part of a wider program for vulnerable minors. During a recent report, this is a visit to the 33rd prison in Los Hornos on the outskirts of Buenos Aires, some 15 men and women transformed themselves into popular superheroes as well as some villains from movies such as Frozen and Maleficent. Children can stay with their mothers in the women's prison until the age of 4, a tough upbringing that the volunteers are hoping to brighten up. The so-called Superheroes Club is dressed as favorite children characters, and they play, dance and hand out sweets and toys to the very excited children. And they are all still my favorites. That's it on The World Today. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Nwaka. Have a good evening.